Hi, welcome to your favorite Kirby YouTube channel where we talk about Kirby all day and all night. Introduction. Our topic of the day is of course Super Kirby Clash, the new Kirby title which was recently released on the Nintendo Switch this September. This was one of those titles where they announce it in a Nintendo Direct and then release it directly afterwards, which are always fun. I always enjoy those. This new game that we got is a remake slash sequel slash reimagining of Team Kirby Clash on the Nintendo 3DS, which was in itself an expansion of the subgame featured in Kirby Planet Robobot. Pricing. What is probably the most distinct thing about the Kirby Clash series is that it is the only free-to-start Kirby title, and it's one of Nintendo's few free-to-start titles. They tend to not use them unless it's on a mobile platform, meaning that technically speaking, you can complete the entire game without spending any money at all, although the player is encouraged throughout the game to purchase gem apples, the game's currency, at the shop, which does cost real-world money. This isn't particularly obtrusive, and I'm sure many players will be able to complete the game without spending so much as a dime, though I did personally take the plunge so I could buy more fun emotes, of which there are many. One of my favorite parts of the monetization method seen in Kirby Clash is that there is a limit to the amount of real-world money that can be spent on the game. In the original 3DS title, this was about $30, while Super boosts that to $40, an acceptable increase given the more substantial content and visual fidelity. I appreciate this, since it means the game isn't a bottomless pit to throw your cash into like many other free-to-play titles, and feels a bit less aggressive towards the consumer. And now that we've got sort of the monetization and pricing systems out of the way, since that's a pretty big feature of the game, we can sort of move on to the actual game itself and discuss that a little bit.
Presentation.
The game's visuals are in line with the previous Nintendo Switch Kirby title, Kirby Star Allies, and everything looks great. Environments are very colorful and detailed and very enjoyable to look at. Unfortunately, this also does mean that, like Kirby Star Allies, the frame rate has been set to 30 frames per second, which is a bit of a shame, especially considering the 3DS version ran at 60. I was also really pleased with the game's soundtrack. As you'd expect, there are some really fantastic tunes in here. And then there's also this.
One, two, three, and maybe four.
Whoa! Yes, that's right. Super Kirby Clash is the first game in the series to feature a lyrical song. Wow. I was pretty shocked to discover this initially and didn't really know what to make of it, but I've really grown to quite enjoy it. There's even multiple variations included throughout the game, which is nice. Story. Super Kirby Clash is pretty barren in regards to narrative, and there isn't really much to say about what is included. With that said, some specific details divulged in the late game have some interesting implications for the wider Kirby universe, though I doubt if anyone who doesn't already have a pre-existing investment in Kirby lore will find much value in the addition. So yeah, it's pretty standard Kirby tale, vanquish the darkness, etc.
Gameplay.
The gameplay featured in Kirby Clash is pretty straightforward. You and a team of 3 other Kirbys venture out into the wilds of the Dream Kingdom to fight a series of different bosses and earn rewards and level up by meeting various requirements in these battles. There are 4 different classes to choose from, each of which is based upon a copy ability from the main series of games. There's the Sword Hero, who is the jack of all trades sort of character and excels in all respects. Hammer Lord, who is slow but deals tons of damage. Dr. Healmore, the healer of the group. And B-Mage, who can stop time, and this time-stopping power is something you'll find is a little overpowered in comparison to the other classes. So when you're online, you'll pretty much only come across B-Mages, since that just seems to be the easiest one to get a really good time with. That being said, each class can be pretty fun to play as, and their usefulness can depend on which boss you're fighting. So you do at times need to strategize on which to use. You can also buy tons of different gear in the game's shop, paid for with gem apples of course, several of which are quite amusing and or cool. However, all of these abilities were in the original 2017 game, and I do wish that more classes had been added. Kirby has had a wealth of power-ups throughout the years, so it's a bit of a shame not to have any added playstyles here, and their absence makes the game feel a bit less fresh as a result. Jumping off that, I'd say my biggest complaint about the title is that it simply doesn't do quite enough to distance itself from Team Kirby Clash Deluxe on the 3DS. While there is certainly more content here to enjoy, if you've played the original, it does feel less engaging, since there aren't actually all that many new bosses, or even all that much new gear to purchase. The problem is exacerbated by the game's near constant reusing and repackaging of pre-existing bosses. For instance, there are several elemental variants of classic Kirby bosses like Kracko and Ice Dragon, and while cool in concept, their attack patterns and movement aren't really unique enough to make these fights feel all that different from the base incarnations. The game also requires a good deal of grinding for levels and materials, and this feels even more repetitive than it did 2 years ago, since I've already beaten a majority of these bosses countless times before. This unfortunately means that if you haven't played the original, you'll likely have a more enjoyable experience than someone who has, which is just kind of a weird turn of events and not really the ideal situation. That's not to say the game isn't fun, and the issues I've discussed are alleviated slightly by what is probably the most major addition, online play. Super Kirby Clash is just the second Kirby game to feature proper online play, and while performance can at times be pretty inconsistent, I did find myself really enjoying being able to take on bosses with other people from around the globe, in spite of the occasional laggy match. There's even a pretty decent utilization of emotes, which I mentioned previously, that can be quite fun to mess around with. There's also, of course, the option to play with friends, another fun way to enjoy the game.
Conclusion.
Super Kirby Clash is a solid addition to the catalog of Kirby games. It doesn't do much beyond what was already in the 3DS version, but it's still a fun time, and the Kirby Clash series continues to be a great interpretation of the free-to-start pricing model. It's also excellent to see Nightmare return in a starring role. It's been too long, old friend. Another upside to the title is that if you are striving to 100% the game, you should be kept busy for quite some time, as the game has tons of achievements to fill out if you're so inclined. The game certainly does have issues. The inconsistent online experience can be pretty frustrating at times, and I do wish there was a wider selection of all new bosses and abilities, but I am satisfied enough with what we got here. And who knows, maybe there'll be some sort of DLC sometime down the line to improve the game further, though I can't really say I'm holding my breath for that. I think this is a perfectly fine title to fill the gap between Kirby Star Allies and whatever comes next for the series, and I am glad to have played it. I'd certainly recommend giving the game a whirl. There's quite a bit to enjoy here, and of course free to start, so you can give it a spin, see if you like it. If you don't, no money lost, so that's cool. Well, that's the end now. Goodbye.